It's movie time, and we're back again with movie time. Hey, everybody! Hope you had a fantastic couple of days, and we are here with our Friday movie time. So, as you know, we are having an incredibly amazing show tonight with a special guest. And tonight we also have with us our co-host Arpo. Hey, Arpo, how you doing?
I'm doing really well. Looking forward to this one tonight. This is a first for us, so I'm really excited.
And also with us tonight is my co-host Olaf. Hey, Olaf, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. It's been another great day in the state of Indiana. Nice 95-degree day, but it's been fun. Looking forward to tonight's show. It's going to be a good, exciting one.
Yeah, and with us tonight is our incredible guest, the one that we have been waiting for, and he gets to break our very first virginity of having one of these on, Steve Mangel, who is a completion bond guarantor. Hey, Steve, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your company? So, how did we all get here?
Sure. So, my company is UniFi Completion Guarantors. That's UniFi with two I's, UNIFI. And it's a fairly new company. We formed UniFi in 2013. But previously, my two partners and I, we worked together at another bond company that was called IFG, which stood for International Film Guarantors. And so one of my partners is Mike Levine, and Mike co-ran production at IFG, and my other partner is Stephen Lead, and Stephen ran business affairs there, and I was the president of IFG. And in 2013, the Fireman's Fund, a fairly large insurance company who owned IFG at the time,
Mm-hmm.
sold IFG to Film Finances, which is one of the largest bonders in the world and was our biggest competitor. And so
Yes.
after that sale, the three of us decided to start up a new boutique bond company. And that was the beginning of UniFi.
Wow. So, and how long has UniFi been going?
So it's since 2013. So we're in our fourth year now. And before that, the Mike, Stephen, and I worked at IFG for I ran IFG for 15 years, and so while I was there, I oversaw bonding of over 400 films. So
Wow.
we're very experienced a team, and I took the best parts of IFG, and we came over to start UniFi.
So, are there like specific budget ranges that you work with, or and specific types of mediums? Like, what qualifies for a bond, and like what you wouldn't or shouldn't be bonding or recommend as to bond?
Well, at UniFi, we're providing bonds for both live action and animated feature films, as well as TV productions and series.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Projects tend to come in all genres. They're shooting all over the world, and the budgets tend to be pretty wide ranging. We've bonded projects as small as a little over $1 million to as high as $200 million. Um, for us, I would say our sweet spot tends to be independent films in the range of 10 to $70 million. But as I said, we often get involved with projects that are much bigger than that, and smaller as well. But we don't typically get involved with too many projects that are budgeted under $5 million.
Okay. Is there a specific reason as to what goes on in that range, or is just that at that point in time it uses a different method?
No, well, it's not that sub $5 million are either necessarily more or less risky per se. It's just that putting a bond together tends to be both relatively expensive, and certainly more expensive for lower budget pictures because the fees tend to be a percentage of budget, and there's just a certain number of transactional costs, legal documentation that goes on with it. So for small productions, it tends to be both costly and time consuming, and so there really aren't any that I know of right now bond companies that are bonding films. Certainly less than probably $2 million. And when you're talking about those smaller independent films that are being financed with equity investments or soft money like tax incentives or subsidies, every penny sort of is important to go on the screen. And so to have to take $100,000 or more and allocate that to a completion bond may not be the best use of those funds if you can convince your financiers that their investment is okay without one. So that's always a bit of a catch-22 for filmmakers that are starting out but are still doing films at the lower budget ranges, which of course we applaud and we love, but unfortunately for us, we just don't have the manpower to devote to it.
So it would be in general 5 million and above that would be the threshold for doing that.
Yeah, for us. Yeah, I think that there may be some others out there that will look at films, starting at about $2 million. But again, we fashion UniFi as being a bit of a boutique bond company. We are somewhat selective in terms of the companies we work with and the projects we like to be involved with. Really, the purpose behind that is we've come to be able to provide a very top level of services to the customers we work with. They've come accustomed to getting the sort of personalized, very prioritized service. And so we'd never want to take on so many films or too many films where that the quality of our service might deteriorate. So for us, if we're faced with the proposition of bringing on a lot of films or maintaining a select group of customers and giving them priority service, we always fall back to wanting to be the best service provider there is.
Okay, so then what would be some of the criteria that filmmakers would show in order to have a guarantor like you?
From the production perspective, they really need to show that they're experienced producers and filmmakers and have a well thought out production plan. We work with a lot of first timers, including plenty of first time directors, but we don't want everybody to be first timers or not having the experience at the particular budget levels or in the particular shooting locations that the project's going to be in. So basically, they need to prove to us that they know what they're doing and can execute their production plan. And from the finance perspective, they need to show us that they've secured the financing needed to make the film. The funds don't necessarily have to be deposited in a bank account, but the filmmakers need to demonstrate proof of financing, and whether that's coming from a lending bank or a fund or equity investors or tax incentives or subsidies. They have to show us basically a finance plan. Who are all their financiers? Where is the money coming from? And that they've actually secured commitments for financiers to be providing 100% of the financing needed to make the film.
Okay, so like letters of intent and that sort of thing.
Yeah, either agreements or letters of commitment, letters of intent. Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you tell me about, in other words, what your ideal kind of client is?
Well, for us, as I said, we're sort of boutique, so we tend to work with well-capitalized independent film and TV production companies that are regularly producing one, two, or sometimes even maybe as high as 3 projects every year. And like us, they're really looking to build a long-term relationship with a bonding company. So they're looking for what we have to offer, which is, as I said, it's a more personalized and flexible service than maybe offered by the larger, bigger, more corporate bond companies that we compete with. But we can offer those kind of services at very competitive rates.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So,
Now, I had another little question.
yeah.
For our listeners that may not understand what bonding is and what you do, can you kind of explain why somebody would want to seek out maybe your company to bond their production?
Sure. So, filmmakers are usually getting bonds for the benefit of their financiers and investors. What the bond does is, well, first of all, we have a very experienced staff. So we're first going to evaluate the production plan. We're going to determine whether or not the filmmakers have enough resources, and by that I mean both in terms of time schedule to make the film and money budget to make the film. Do they have the resources needed to make the film they want? If they do, and we evaluate it, sometimes we make adjustments to their plan to make sure we get it right. But then for the financiers, what we're guaranteed is one, the picture is going to be completed. If something happens along the way to a production and it never gets finished and able to be delivered to distributors, then the bond company is going to repay to the financiers and investors all the money that they had advanced to that date.
I see.
If the film is completed, but for one reason or another, it's not able to be delivered to a distributor in accordance with the approved specifications that that distributor contracted for, then the bond company is going to pay back to the investors the value of that distribution agreement. And lastly, if we get it wrong and we sign off on a budget and it turns out that for whatever reasons, it's going to cost more to make that production than the budget, then the bond company is going to cover the over budget cost to make sure the film is completed and delivered. So that's the protections that investors and financiers usually want. In most cases, those financiers don't have people on their own staffs who can evaluate production budgets and schedules and all the agreements that go with it. They're looking for us really to do that for them, and they want the security that when they sign on to invest in a project, that one, that project's going to get completed, and two, most importantly, that if somebody's told them the project's going to cost $5 million or $10 million, whatever that budget is, that they don't get caught in a situation where they have to end up putting in more money into a project than they signed on for.
What's the next? It's true, and what I also agree with what Jeanette Milo had made mention of at the time when she was Jeanette Burling. Milo has made mention during an interview that she said a filmmaker's duty is also to their financier to protect their money as much as the film guarantor does as well. That the two of you should be working hand in hand to make sure that the investor has gotten the complete value of their investment.
Well, yeah, that's absolutely true, and I think we work hand in hand with producers. We're not
Yes.
the enemy of a producer. We're really there to help and support. The idea is the relationship between a bond company and the production company is a very honest relationship. We all want to make the film that the filmmakers want to make, but we all have to understand that there's just so many bricks that that are available to build the house, so to
Yes.
speak. And we need to make sure that the filmmakers stay within the resources that they've been given. It's not only important from us, from a bond company, because if things go awry, we're going to end up having to have a loss and pay a claim. But it's very important for filmmakers, because if they get a reputation that they're not able to make films within their budgets and their schedules, they will stop being hired to make
Yes.
film.
Right.
And so we really have to work hand in hand to, for our benefit, but also for the filmmakers' benefit.
So what you're saying, that it's like there's been obviously then some challenges that you faced over the time with troubled productions, and it's like how have you gotten past them in terms of that? Like if somebody is all about the artistic vision and forgets the fact that it's like this is a client's money that we're talking about here.
Well, we really try to get things right before the cameras start to roll.
Yes.
And by that, I mean, we evaluate the production plan, we meet with the filmmakers to understand how they plan to make their film. If necessary, we may ask them to make adjustments to their production plan and elements. They may need to increase their budget, or in cases where that's just impossible because they don't have the ability to resource additional financing, they may have to reduce the scope or complexity of the script in the production. In the end, we need to trust that the producers can execute their production plan and complete the picture within the budget and schedule that we've all agreed upon.
Okay. So some of those challenges being also making sure that they stay within the production, and certainly people come within that of those who actually can stay ahead of their budget, those who over exceed their budget, and those who are right on budget by the end of the time. It's like, what are your ways that you use towards mitigating those risks and those factors?
Well, it really depends on what those risks are and what the challenges are. As I said, most of the time, through our early due diligence, we find that we do all the needed adjustments up front. At least that's what the goal is going to be. So usually, once the cameras roll, we're not usually faced with circumstances that at least could have been foreseen, at the beginning of the production if people were only paying attention or were very experienced at filmmaking. So, I have a great staff. They're usually able to, they know how much it costs to make films. They know how much time it takes to make films. So we usually get it right. On occasion, and this is why bond companies are around, unforeseen things do happen. And then it's just a question of, okay, how are we going to deal with that particular challenge? And from our point of view, it's usually a very collaborative process where we get together with the filmmakers. We discuss the challenges at hand. We discuss what are the options of bringing back a project, so it can get back on schedule and back on budget, at least, hopefully, so that there's not going to be any overcosts or production delays. But if that's not possible, then to mitigate and reduce it as much as possible. And we're getting everybody's opinion as what is the best way to approach these challenges. And we usually come up with the best plan that everybody agrees upon. And as long as the producers are then able to execute on this revision to the production plan, then we still sort of stay in the background and monitor their progress and see that they're doing all the necessary steps that we would be taking if we were in charge of the production itself. So usually we don't have to step in, but if a producer for one reason or another is unable to execute that plan or unwilling to execute that plan, then on occasion we have to step in and take over the management of a production.
And that could be anything from bringing in a different director to the project to bringing in a different crew that will get the project done.
Yeah, it's very rare, and I don't think we've ever done it, so I'm not sure how often it's actually happened where a director has been replaced by the bond company. Usually it's if you can all be around a table, and if you can point to one person who's creating the problems or the issues on set, then of course we'll do something about that person. But it's usually not that simple a solution. It's usually just things have unforeseen challenges have presented the production, and now we all have to deal with it in the best possible way. And so we will, if it's a short-term solution, either Mike Levine or Beth DePatty, who's on our production staff, might visit the production for a couple of days. And if it's going to be a prolonged situation, then we will likely bring in a very experienced production person to be on set and figure out what needs to be done. And sometimes that's just adding, it may be replacing some people, but a lot of times it's just helping them out by adding more support staff to help them get over the hump.
Yeah, adding the value to be able to take away the risk that's been happening if they lost their way.
Sometimes there's just a need for additional people with some expertise and experience in various areas. So again, if the complication runs in, as oftentimes it does, in executing the visual effects plans, then sometimes we've had to bring in visual effects experts to help out and to assist them in executing a plan.
Which is understandable in regards to that.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you always hope that the team that is making the setting out to make the production has, again, all the resources it needs in terms of money, time, and staff, and their expertise and their professionalism and all those things. But again, sometimes best laid plans don't always come to bear fruit, and a bond company is there really to provide resources to the production in terms of helping them make sure that they can get the film done on time, on budget. And if not, and it looks like we're going to have to put in over costs, then certainly we're going to look to try to get it done with as little of a loss as possible.
Is that including also recommending resources as well?
We do. I mean, usually the recommendations are before the production starts. So our customers ask us all the time for recommendations on line producers and production accountants and things like that. We're usually not giving recommendations on the creative side of things. That's not our thing. But certainly we've worked with plenty of great people over the time on films, and if we can place great people on new productions, that's great for us and great for the people we've worked with before.
As well as sales agents, because you have worked well closely with distributors.
Yeah, we work with just a lot of sales agents. I don't think we necessarily have if somebody asks us, can we recommend sales agents? Of course, we can, and we can put people in touch with sales agents. But for the most part, I would say when a project comes through the door, the producers have already selected who they are going to work with from a sales point of view. And, we work with all sales agents, and we end up, working with, a lot of, distributors, both domestic and international.
And
Okay.
which brings us also to one other point as well that is quite interesting on that. It's like that they've done that. Are there supposed to be? Are there people that it's like are called on the quote unquote list that you will work with, and those who you will not work with in terms of sales agents or in terms of casting people or etc. It's like, or do you just work with what the unit has brought with you if you know any, or is it ever suggested a replacement because it's like that person is not considered to be acceptable?
So, I think the key positions for us tend to be who the line producer is going to be and who the production accountant is going to be. Usually, if a production comes to us and they've already have talked to and made a decision on their line producer or their production accountant, then it's up to us to vet them, and hopefully we approve them, and if not, we'll have a discussion with the production about that. But if they haven't engaged anybody yet, then that's a position that we're going to discuss. And if they have people in mind that they want us to consider, then we will vet their choices. And at the same time, if they don't have anybody or don't know people, we'll give them our recommendations. In terms of everybody else, once we have the line producer, in place that, we have confidence in, then we usually allow that line producer to pick the crew that, he wants to work with. Sales agents, we work with everybody. We don't, we don't play favorites or anything like that. And in terms of, other creative, personnel, there's probably, a short list of directors that we wouldn't choose to work with, usually because they have a history of just not caring to stay within schedule and budget. So that's not a good thing for a bond company. And in terms of cast, again, we work with almost any cast members. If they've had a difficult past or a checkered past, and we know a couple of actors that fall into that category, then we may consider not bonding a picture because of that. But again, it's a relatively short list. Again, if we get comfortable with the line producer and the production accountant and the overall experience of the producers themselves, and the director doesn't have a sort of a checkered past, then we're going to be good to go.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because Grace and I were just talking about one of those directors earlier today.
Yes.
So, given today's financial climate, where would you say are probably the most attractive places to film at this point in terms of keeping within a low to medium budget?
Well, I think you always start with your script, and determine what are the options you have for the locations where that particular script can be shot. Especially for smaller independent films that aren't done all on green screen, with visual effects. It usually matters where where the story is based, and sometimes you have to shoot in particular locations if you can't cheat them. But once you you know all the options available to you, then you're usually next you want to consider probably, well, where is your director and your principal cast willing to travel to and work at that particular time? So, we've had a lot of situations where people have gone down the road and looked to budget their films at, all different locations, only to find out that when they talk to their director or their star, that no, they weren't willing to leave Los Angeles or somewhere else, leave their family for that period of time. So that's obviously, filmmakers have to, put those things in mind. And, once you know what your options are, then usually you're going to take into account the soft money that's available to shoot in all those locations, whether that's subsidies or tax credits or rebates. And you then look at those options and you see what is the best economic value usually to shoot. And people usually are deciding these things. If it's not based upon the script, or it's not based upon where your cast and crew are willing to work, it usually comes down to where do you get the most bang for your buck. And so we're bonding films, really shooting everywhere, but a large part of every finance plan today tends to be soft money, and where people can get tax credits or subsidies or both, and that's a huge component, and that's usually a big driver as to determining what location you're going to shoot in.
Okay. Now, what would you say when somebody is pitching their project to you, some of the common mistakes that people have made and some of the good things that they've done when they come to pitch to you their project?
Well, I think it comes down to preparation. First-time producers that have either not produced a film before or have never bonded a film before, usually don't have any idea of what's required or how long the process takes. For example, I've gotten calls where a filmmaker will tell me that they're starting to shoot next week and they want a bond. It's just not how it works. People, if you've never been through it before, you don't realize the time that's involved, and in a lot of ways the costs that are involved. So, for us, even a film that has a relatively simple finance plan, usually takes at least, I would say, 4 weeks to get done, sometimes more than that. But usually, smaller independent films, particularly ones that are going to have, as part of their finance plan, distribution agreements with international distributors. And for example, we're just closing one now, and it's pretty typical for a smaller independent film project, but it has 23 international distribution agreements. And so for that finance plan to close, that means we have to negotiate and close agreements with each of those distributors, together with the sales agency, the investors, the producers, and the distributors. So that's 23 agreements that have to be negotiated before distributors will first even pay their pre-sale deposits, which are a condition before anybody else will put their financing into the film. So on a film project like that, that's typical. It can take anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks to close, and first timers just don't realize either that it can take that long, or what's also tends to be an issue is a lot of even very experienced filmmakers know that it's going to take that long, but they end up having a much shorter window because they've only been able to lock in their cast and, or director, about, maybe it's, 2 weeks or 4 weeks ahead of when they have to start filming to meet everybody's schedule. And so they know that they're going to end up starting production before the bond probably is going to close. And then they have to be able to be experienced enough to know how they're going to, or well capitalized enough to be able to get through the start of production and funding the cost of that start before the bond catches up and closes. So it could be very difficult, even for the most experienced producers to get through. And so I probably just recommend that for filmmakers who haven't done it before is to get somebody on your team that has had that experience that can provide, guidance to you.
Okay.
Because the bonding rates can also vary between experience as well as also the risk factors.
It can. I mean, for us, in terms of what we charge for a bond, it's fairly within a small range. I mean, it's usually somewhere between 2 and 3% of the budget of a film, and it's largely dependent on the size of the budget, meaning that you pay, if your budget goes up, you pay a little less of a rate. I mean, your fee itself, in terms of dollars is going to be higher, but in terms of a percentage of budget, it will be a little lower. But if we look at a project and it has an inexperienced production team, or it presents risks in terms of where it's going to shoot, or its budget or schedule, and there are things that we just can't overcome and find common ground on, then we don't think you can really rate against that kind of risk. So we don't look at a project and say, oh, this is extremely risky, so instead of 3%, we're going to charge 3.5%. It's more like, hey, it's really risky. This one's not for us. Thanks for the opportunity. Hopefully we'll catch you on the next one.
Yeah, it's like, or please come back to us when you have a much more reasonable outlook.
Oh yeah, look, we're absolutely trying to say, yes to projects. I mean, that's our business. We'd be out of business if we said no, or if we weren't willing to take on risk. I mean, we are. I mean, we're bearing risk all the time. But again, it's just a question of at some point in time, we can look at a project and say it's just an undue risk. And when it in those situations, we're trying to work with the production in terms of how can they alter their production plan to help get us on board. And that again could be, look, you have to increase your budget, and a lot of times that's fine. They have the capability of doing that, and they do that. But other times their financing is locked. There's just nowhere to go for more money, and then you have to start looking at, well, are there ways to simplify the project so that you can reduce the number of days, the number of scenes, take out, some scenes that probably would never make the final film anyway, or reduce the complexity of some action or visual effects in the film so that it becomes simpler and less expensive, and then we can sign on to it. But at the end of the day, if they can't make those adjustments, and we understand sometimes people can't or just are unwilling to make those adjustments, then we sort of want to shake hands and wish them luck on their project, and hopefully they may have better luck with another bond company, and that's sort of the good thing about why we started UniFi in the first place. We didn't we didn't want there just to be one big bond company, and where producers just wouldn't have any choice.
Yeah.
And so we offer an alternative, but we're good in the sense that we're not the only one that filmmakers can go to, and we think we offer a sort of unique way we go about things, and the way we build relationships with our customers. And I think our staff has more experience, maybe than our competitors, in the sense that they were line producers in their own rights before they ever came to work at the bond company. And so, we've seen all sorts of projects at all sorts of budget ranges, and we've seen all sorts of problems and challenges that come about, and face production. And we take them all in stride. We've usually seen them before, so it's not like we get nervous and overreact to the first challenge that falls of production. We know it's hard making films, but we're there not to overreact or cause more difficulties and complications. We're really there to add help and support, and hopefully with that we all find we'll get to smooth sailing. At least that's our objective.
Yep.
Now, at what point does your involvement with a film end? I mean, is it during post-production, or when the film is completely done and starting to look for markets, or?
Well, we usually get involved in projects when a little before probably they're starting pre-production, but where they have most things that are either final or close to being final in terms of budget, schedules, cast and crew contracts, financing agreements or term sheets. So most of that has to be first settled before people come to us, unless they're just coming to us to recommend. So people will do that far in advance. So it has to be sort of well on its way to being close to being able to start pre-production before we get involved. And then, once they show us that they have their financing secured, we do our production due diligence, and we also, at the same time, we start the legal process and putting all the documents together, including the completion bond, the producer's agreement, all the distribution, contracts. And then we will monitor the production, all the way from its start until the time when the picture is completed, through post, completed, and distribute and delivered to all the international and domestic distributors. And usually at that point, that's where our involvement ends. Unless for some, it's one of those pictures that was really troubled and we ended up having to put in, money to complete it, in which case the bond company has rights to recoup it from the proceeds and things like that. But if everything has gone smoothly, once the film is delivered to the distributors, that's where we end, and we're then starting the same process on a different film.
Okay.
Okay. Now you mentioned the financing. In other words, do you deal with other types of financing, or do you just strictly do the bonding of the project?
Yeah, we're niche. I mean, we're just providing the completion bonds. We work with many banks, lenders, and investors, sales companies, distributors, and we're always open to assist them in any way we can, but we don't want to be competing with them.
Oh, okay.
Which does make sense, and that's it's like I understand that you're talking about also in terms of mitigating risk factors. You work with insurance companies as well, don't you? In terms of working hand in hand with them, because they are also about risk mitigation in that sense.
Well, sure. So, one of the things that is a precondition to a bond is that we have our insurance requirements that a production has to have in place before we can issue the bond. That would include your E&O insurance, your GL insurance, but most importantly, it's your motion picture production package insurance. So that's your it includes coverage for any loss or damage to your negative, any
Your equipment
loss
goes
or
out to
damage to
sea.
equipment, but most importantly for us, it's also is covering any injury or disability to your key cast and crew. So we're working with the filmmaker's insurance broker and agent all the time to make sure those insurance coverages are in place, and they're through insurance companies that we approve. But yeah, we're working with brokers all the time.
So then there's actually really great advantages to working with a bonding company as opposed to going through the film without any of those factors. Like, are there better legal protections that are put into place, as well as, like, what comes into play of being a bonded production versus an unbonded production?
Well, yeah. Look, from the producer standpoint, as I said, we can be a great resource to them. In making sure that they have a sound production plan, that it's been not only through their eyes it's been vetted, but through our eyes it's been vetted, and knowing that we all agree that they have the adequate resources in both time and money to go make the project they want to make. For the lenders and investors, we offer a great measure of security. As I said, in most cases, the banks and investors, they don't have people with any experience or capability to evaluate scripts, budgets, schedules, cash flows, post-production plans, delivery requirements to distributors. So they're looking for us and our experienced staff to do all of that on their behalf. We're offering them the security that if that film is abandoned and it never gets completed, we're going to pay them back their investment. If it's not delivered to a distributor, we'll pay them the value of that contract. And as I said, most importantly, if for whatever reason it is, if that film is going to cost more than the approved budget that we signed off for, it's not the investor who's going to be put in a position where, because they've already invested, $10 million, now they're put in a position, well, am I going to walk away from the project, or am I going to put in the next $2 million that's actually needed to complete it? No, it's that's what the bond is there for. They can look to the bond company in those situations and say, okay, we've put in our investment, and now you have to put in the overcosts that are necessary to complete the project.
Now, there's the saying I've heard more than once, which is that if the guarantor shows up on the set, somebody's in trouble. Which isn't always the case, but
Yes.
how do you know when you need to show up on the set? I mean, how do you get your information about the production?
Okay, so we're first of all, we're getting our information directly from the production company. So it's not being filtered to us from or through insurance brokers or agents. We're working directly with the producers of the film, and really we thrive on having that direct communication. And that means that, once, even before a picture starts, but certainly once a picture starts shooting, we're usually in contact with the line producer and the production accountant almost every day. And if not every day, then, every couple of days. And every day we're receiving the production report. So we know exactly what was shot that day and what scenes or partial scenes missed. And if people aren't completing their days, then we would expect that before we have to call them, they're calling us to explain, what happened during that day, and then also their plan as to how to make up for any lost scenes, or how they're gonna, if they're continually going into overtime, what they're going to do to offset the increased cost. So again, if we've done our work right, there always are variances to productions and schedules, but hopefully they're not so severe to mean that the picture is not going to be able to complete it within their budget or deliver it on time. If it looks like that is not going to be the case, then again, before we show up, we're usually we don't do surprise visits. That's just not our style.
Like, surprise! It's your guarantor.
You don't just.
We want to be very collaborative with the filmmakers. We're working with them. We're not working against them, and so. A lot of times, even, when we show up, if it's not at the beginning of production, a lot of times we like to show up and wish people luck and take them out to a nice dinner and things like that. But if it's when it's more serious and things are very challenging for a production, then we're showing up and really rolling up our sleeves and, working with them and figuring out what do we have to do and how can we help to put it back on track.
Well, that's good to know that you don't just show up, peek around the corner, and go, "We're here."
Well, I always imagine some little guy in a trench coat talking in his sleeve, passing on information to you guys. So it's good to know everything is above board.
As I said, you really want to work with filmmakers and producers that trust that we're working together,
right,
as a team and not against them. The best thing for us, even if unforeseen things have happened that are causing either the schedule to be busted or the budget to be busted, is to learn of those things, as quickly as possible. If you're working on a production and you get to those challenges and you're still early in shooting, there's often a lot of things that could be done to help put a picture back on track. But if you're working with producers that are afraid to communicate with the bond company, and I have been in that situation where bad things happened on the first week, and rather than tell the bond company, the producers were like, "Look, we'll fix this next week, so let's keep this under wraps right now, and then by the next week when things are better, okay, we'll be able to tell them what happened this week." And then they go another week, and of course things don't improve and even get worse, and then they're like, "Well, we certainly can't tell them now."
And what's the funniest thing?
And everything starts to spiral, and then by the time everybody comes to true confessions, it's just too late in the game to do anything about it.
Right.
And again, those are the people who find out pretty quickly that when it comes to future films that are being bonded and they have to be approved by the bond company, they've lost that right, and it's very hard to gain it back I don't mind, or we don't mind as a company that challenges happen and we have to dig in and figure it all out. But what we do mind is when things go wrong, people aren't transparent and don't communicate that's hard to come back from.
Right.
And so again, for whether you're, first timers or, experienced filmmakers, people will tell you that, the bond is there to help and support, and there's nothing really you're going to tell us that we haven't probably faced before. So you might as well just give us the news. And we'll all jump in together and figure it out.
Yeah, it's the funniest story when.
Yeah. So basically, gang, if you're getting in trouble, let the guarantor know. Be upfront with the guarantor, because that's what they're there for.
Yes. They are there to protect you, to make sure that everything is going to go smooth. And it may be a solution that you're racking your brain with, that having an outsider's point of view come in might be able to save your production a lot of money.
Yeah, absolutely. Or look, and in the worst case, even if, something's happened and it's just, you're not going to be able to save the film in terms of it not going over budget. I mean, it doesn't happen frequently, but it just happens, and that's why investors want the insurance that a bond provides. But even in those situations, you want your bond company to be able to say to people, yeah, it was a really challenged production, but the production team did everything right. It communicated, the issues promptly. It took direction. It was very collaborative, and but there were just challenges that sometimes couldn't be overcome. But you don't want people to say, yeah, it was a very challenged production, but production made it far worse than it had to be.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, how has bankable changed in today's market for you?
Bankable. So I'm not exactly sure what you mean, but usually when I hear that term, it's in the context of like a bankable director or star,
Yes.
meaning that
Yes.
they're famous enough to be capable of guaranteeing box office success simply by being in the film, sort of like a marquee value.
Yes.
I would say for us, bankable means it's a little different. I would say it would mean a director or a cast that's famous enough to be capable of generating the pre-sale distribution contracts that are needed to finance the picture.
Right. Yeah, that's what I meant.
A little bit different, for a studio project. They're going to have worldwide distribution rights, and they're not looking to pre-sell their project to international distributors. So from their point of view, bankability tends to be like, okay, what are we going to get on the first opening when it's theatrically released? But for independent films, it really comes down to, can we, with this director and this cast and this script, get enough pre-sales to finance our picture? And although that list of directors and actors that are bankable is always changing, still having a strong director and a strong cast and a good script, it's usually vital to be able to secure pre-sale agreements. And without pre-sale agreements, if you're only left to financing from equity investors and soft money, subsidies and tax credits, it usually means that it's probably a much lower budgeted project, and not usually the ones we're bonding.
Okay.
Now, we've been talking a little bit this week also about diversity within the industry, and with that ever changing as well, which will lead into something else I would also want to ask you, because you had talked about your relationships with distribution as well. Does diversity now now that it is starting to open up and people are actually starting to incentivize diversity within the industry, is that starting to open up new capabilities of projects that are being bonded in today's day?
Yeah, well, I certainly think that there's new distribution channels that are opening up that were never there before. Some of that is great. So we do a lot of we bond a lot of projects that are being sold to Netflix, on oftentimes on a worldwide basis, or to Amazon in the same way. Which is great, but at the same time, it's also sometimes displacing films that would otherwise have been sort of distributed in the, I'll call it the old-fashioned form.
Yes.
So, I mean, as I said, as much as some of the things we're doing get distributed through new channels of distribution, I would say still the large majority of the films we get involved with are being financed really through senior lending, which is, it's all based upon how much collateral you can get for your pre-sale distribution agreement. So, that really becomes the key for a lot of independent productions. And as I said, it's not uncommon for us to be bonding a film where there are 20 plus international distribution agreements that all have to be put in place. So those contracts with the distributors are called notices of assignment, or NOAs for short. And those NOAs set out the delivery requirements that the bonder must meet, and it requires then the distributors to pay their license fee so long as the film is delivered in accordance with pre-agreed, specifications. So for us, it really doesn't matter how it's going to be distributed. What matters is, does that distributor provide a bankable contract?
Okay.
So, because most distributors anyway, I won't say all distributors, but most distributors are not willing to advance their license fee, or at least the majority of their license fee, putting aside a small upfront deposit before the film is completed and delivered to them. So they may offer, for their distribution rights, if it's a worldwide distributor, like a Netflix, they may offer the entire budget. So if you're making a $10 million film, Netflix may say, sure, when it's completed and delivered to us, we'll pay you $10 million. Or more likely, they'll say, once it's completed and delivered to us and we start streaming it, we'll start to pay you that $10 million over the next 2 or 3 years. And for international distributors, they'll say, yes, we'll put, 20%, deposit up front, but that 80%, we're not paying you until the film is delivered to us, which requires the producers then to take those contracts and go out and get a bank loan for the value of those contracts. And then the bank is not willing to give the filmmaker any money for those contracts without a completion bond, because they don't know, one, that
the film will ever get made.
It will ever get made, and it will actually be delivered to that distributor on time and in according with the specs that require then the distributor to pay its MG. So the bond basically says, okay, if we fail to deliver it on time or per those specifications, that, whether it was $1 million or $2 million or whatever that value is that the distributor was going to pay on delivery,
Mm-hmm.
If they don't have to pay it because we failed in our obligation, we'll pay it to the bank, and that's the security that banks and investors are looking for.
So, is there different procedures then when working with aggregators? Have you worked with aggregators versus distributors? And if there's any sort of difference in that procedure?
I don't think it's all that much difference. Again, it really comes down to are you presented with a contract? Are you presented with a contract from a source that, from a credit rating standpoint, a bank will be willing to lend against? And then it's just a question of, okay, what are the requirements in terms of delivery, and do we think those are reasonable for us to guarantee under a bond?
Which makes a lot of sense in that. So it's like it's making sure that also all of the factors are taken care of, that there is a guarantee, that there is also all of the paperwork, and that on the filmmaker side, has there ever been an addition to deliverables that has been given to you by a distributor that on also a filmmaker's side that they've sat there and said, okay, now you're throwing me left field on a deliverable?
I wouldn't say it's left field. What is typical is that in every distributor's delivery schedule, there are a host of items that I won't say can't, because obviously they could, but I would say are typically not bonded. And so the distributors agree that there will be a certain set of items that are bonded, which means that once they receive those items, they will pay their license fee for that film, and they will rely on the producer to still deliver them the items that were not bonded. And if the producer fails for some reason and doesn't supply those non-bonded items, then the distributor may have causes of action and remedies to take against the producer, but it does not excuse them from paying the license fee if they get the bonded items.
Okay.
Well, now you've been in the industry, as you told us at the start of the show. You've been in the industry for a lot of years now.
Too many.
What have you seen as being, one of the bigger evolutions in films and how they're made?
Yeah, well, for us, as I said, I think it still comes down to whether or not the producer can secure that bankable director and cast and get his project, financed. But over the years, the percentage of a budget that used to be available from domestic distribution, that has been significantly reduced. And while the proceeds from a film that can be generated from the international markets, that has increased. But being able to find distributors in territories that will pre-buy a film has gotten harder, and the minimum guarantees payable under pre-sale distribution agreements has reduced over time. That all has to do with the value of film in terms of what the value used to be in home video, which is sort of non-existent anymore, and what the value it used to have in TV that has been compromised, but offset somewhat by new distribution channels. But what it all comes down to is it become a lot more difficult for producers to pre-sell a film, which has resulted in budgets becoming tighter to reduce the amount of money or the amount of financing that's required. Plus, it has built up the need to source soft money in the form of subsidies and tax incentives, plus equity investments to bridge that financing gap. So where you used to find films that you could finance, really on the basis of either a domestic distribution deal plus pre-sales in major territories, and possibly without equity financing and without sales, tax incentives and subsidies. For the most part, that those days are gone, and so you have to find a way and shoot in locations where you're going to be able to find a lot of your budget to come from soft money, and you also have to source probably at least 20% of your budget from equity investment.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what do you feel from a business perspective is key in growing the relationship in the film community between the artistic side and from the business side?
From a bond company, I think we tend to be all business. But I think as much as we want to nurture creativity and originality, which is tends to be missing in a lot of film projects these days. The bond company really puts business first, and by that I mean it's once we determine how much resources there are to make a film, both in terms of budget and schedule, the onus then falls on the artistic side, really to be able to execute a plan with creativity, but that keeps within that box that we've all agreed upon. And so, from my point of view, the business side is going to sort of put the parameters on a production, and then the creative artistic side has to figure out, okay, how do we do what we want to do artistically and creatively, within that box.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So, because we're also becoming a really global market in terms of financing, where our financing sources are not only just coming from one country, it comes from multiple countries. And productions evolve to have to make the filmmaking process, evolve with it. And because it's become more global and there's a lot of co-production atmospheres, it's it also makes a demand change on both the filmmakers and audience. How does that also work in terms of the bonding factor when you're dealing between two countries?
Well, we bond films that all over the world, including, and this has been more of a recent event, but including films that are being produced in languages other than English for a particular international market or markets. So many studios, have now divisions, as well as companies like Netflix and Amazon are financing and producing projects really for specific international markets. So that's something that's new for us, but we have started to bond non-English language productions that are really intended for a specific international market. But again, most of our projects, regardless of where they're shooting, they're being made for both domestic and international audiences. It's their ability to what we call to travel, meaning that distributors in various international markets are willing to distribute them because the audiences in their countries are going to hopefully go see them when they're released.
Yeah.
And it's that being making a film that will be exciting for multiple international markets as well as the domestic market, that allows them to have these pre-sale agreements that they need in order to meet their financing plan.
Mm-hmm. So it does make sense, because it's then as the tastes and atmospheres go, it's it's helping to then make bonding a more global accepted practice. It's is there places that it's harder to bond because they don't have that same kind of system?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we go to a lot of international markets where their films just don't travel. I mean, unless you're doing some larger, co-productions, sort of Western co-productions, um, it, you just don't have that ability to pre-sale, a film. For instance, if you're talking about, we've been visiting recently China, and they seem to be very interested in the way we go about financing films and how banks are able to lend to film productions here and the role a bond company plays and how films get distributed all over the world. But when you're talking about doing a indigenous Chinese film, the chances of a film like that being able to um, be something that audiences in America and Britain and France are going to want to see, unless it's going to have particular stars or a director.
Hmm.
That's very challenging for them. It may travel within Asian markets or Greater China, but to travel worldwide, that's challenging. And so you can see that a lot of larger productions there are co-productions, with LA-based companies or European-based companies, and
Hmm.
they're now having, their cast is more of an international cast with both, Western cast as well as Chinese cast, and it's all for, to see whether or not those films can be more interesting for a worldwide audience. But there's a lot of definitely very strong film um, markets and communities that have that continually make films every year, and they make very strong films, and they have a great community. But those films are really made for their local market. They don't travel, and for that reason, they're probably lower budgeted and not bonded, or at least not bonded by us.
So it makes sense because it's like, how then do they work their bonding system so that it works in blend with you?
They don't have a bonding
Okay.
system right now. So
Okay.
again, they're interested in how that would work, but again, the system that we have here in terms of how you how how films are financed and how they're distributed has been built up, probably over the past 75 or more years.
Hmm.
And so for countries like China or Taiwan or those who haven't had that, to think that they can just adopt our system and import it to work in their country, that's probably a failed premise. They have to look at what we do here, but we have, on the same vein, have to look at what they've done there and what has made their film community so successful, and see, sort of how to merge both of
Yeah.
them together in a way that will work best for them.
And still keep their integrity of what their core belief system is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think at least from my point of view, it's not for us to impose our culture and our system necessarily on their way of doing business, which they've been very successful at in making
Yes.
films for a very long time. Even though we don't see those films, that doesn't mean they don't have a strong and vibrant industry. They just go about doing things differently than Western filmmaking. And so as much as they want to learn how we go about, producing and financing Western films, the onus is also on us to better understand, how they go about making their films, and what are the best parts of what they do, and what are the best parts of what we do, and see how the two can work together.
Almost definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Now, in terms of where films are standing today, do you feel like the tent pole is going to remain stable, or do you think it's becoming a collapsing market because of cross-platforming?
Well, I'm not sure I have an opinion on that. I will say that we have bonded, several tentpole films in the past, including Terminator 3 and 4, Iron Man, the Hulk, and the Twilight film, to name a few. However, most tentpole films are produced and financed by the major studios that are rarely bonding their films, unless they're, co-producing and co-financing with another studio, for which we've stepped in and bonded, or if they're working with an independent financier or production company. So, I think there's always going to be a market for franchise films. I think what those franchises are going to be is always going to be changing from year to year. I just hope that one of our independent producers catches one of them.
Cool.
That would be nice. That would be
It
good.
would.
It would be cool. It would be cool.
So, in your opinion, though, it's like there are places like the AFM. So, what do you think of the AFM and other markets, like with regards to the aspects that help us in terms of? Do you find that they are helpful in educating us about what's going on in your particular area, as well as also keeping up with what's new in the industry?
Yeah, well, look, I think people go to these markets for different reasons, depending on really what their role is within the industry. We're neither a buyer or a seller, so we do usually attend both CAN and AFM, but for us, it's more of an opportunity to meet with our customers or potential customers, to discuss their upcoming projects, and to hear what opportunities and challenges that they're facing in the marketplace, and it's really through that dialogue that we learn what they're facing, and then can see how best we might be able to help them with that, if that's a possibility.
Well, that does make sense. So it's like, from your perspective, it actually is beneficial then.
Well, it's again, for CAN, it gives us a great opportunity to meet with some of our customers, and also other, whether it's distributors or sales agents or whatever, that aren't based in LA, where we're based. And so they're coming from all over the world, whether it's the UK or Europe or Asia. And so for us, it's been a great way to meet people all in one place, rather than having to either for them to have to come to LA all the time, or for us to visit them in at their offices. And the same thing for AFM. Again, people are coming from all over the world to LA, and it just gives us an opportunity to do face-to-face meetings with people that usually if we're meeting with them, it's over the phone, but the face-to-face opportunities are limited. So that's why that's what we think anyway, the big markets are for.
Which just makes sense in that. And so, what do you think so in just your opinion, it's like, what do you think that the next big trend in terms of films and other projects that are going to be in the places that you're involved
Um, yeah, look, as far as new trends, I would say we see more of our customers and the production companies we're working with have either gotten into TV production, both long form and series, or they're looking to do that in the very near future.
in?
I don't think that's all too surprising, given sort of the development of TV over the past years. However, we're seeing more opportunities and the need to provide bonds for those TV projects, and to provide the security to the lenders and investors of those projects, because in some cases, the budgets of these TV series has become
And there
really
are,
substantial, really substantial. I mean, we've looked at, series that had a budget of, $5 to $6 million per episode. And so when you're talking about even a
Wow.
minimum commitment, of 10 or 13 episodes, those budgets are sizable, and they're comparable of doing, a pretty significantly budgeted feature film.
yes.
And so, as those budgets have increased and the complexities of producing those series, is growing, with more visual effects requirements and things like that, bigger cast requirements, and larger directors and everything that comes with having those kinds of people attached to a project. Again, the investors, are looking to mitigate their risk by looking for bond companies to come in and evaluate those projects and monitor them during production and make sure, again, they're completed on time and in budget.
Wow. So it's like there's quite the shift of difference that's going on for the new trends.
Yeah, I mean, that's been sort of a nice new area for us. So I would say, again, majority of what we do is still bonding feature films, but every year it seems like we're doing more and more television shows as well.
Do you also think that virtual reality is going to be playing into this now that that's starting to become?
I definitely think so. I mean, but like anything else at the when you're starting, new kinds of production, the budgets tend to be lower and more experimental. And as more and more productions are made and the audience becomes bigger, people are, usually expect the quality of the productions to get better and better. And with that usually comes, larger budgets, bigger schedules, and things like that. So I still think for right now, the budgets are probably too small for people to have the ability to buy a bond for that kind of protection. But again, I think it's just a matter of time when you'll see the VR projects with significant projects and significant risks attached to them, and then the investors will seek the comforts of a completion bond.
Cool.
Yeah, that is cool. So now, do you have any words of wisdom and guidance that you would like to impart to the up and coming filmmakers?
Besides, find a new job that's not going to be hard and difficult and frustrating. Because from where I sit, I always say producing films is probably the most difficult job in the world. But
Oh, great. Now he tells me after I already took the job.
yeah,
Great.
but putting that aside, if you're really dedicated to that as sort of a glutton for punishment, then I just as I said before, is my words of wisdom would be not to be afraid of working with bond companies and to realize that maybe not every project, particularly with films with smaller budgets that can be financed only with equity investments and soft money, maybe they're not right for bonding. But once you graduate and you're working on films with budgets, at least for us in the $4 to $5 million range or more, then working with a bond company should be a very open and honest relationship, and it should be one you should really look forward to and take advantage of. We can be a great resource for both young and inexperienced and experienced filmmakers, and we're hopefully there to ensure you get to make the film you want to make, and work within your available budget and schedule. So again, don't think of us as the enemy. Don't be afraid to knock on our door, especially if you haven't done it before. Again, it's not the it can be a difficult process and a time-consuming process, but look, we're really there to try to make it as simple for you and as expeditious for you as possible. We know everybody wants to get going in making their production, and so for us, it's really how do we get you financed and with a production plan that we're all comfortable with. And so, that's our objective. And, we only get there by working really closely together.
Absolutely.
Now, and from everything that you've said tonight, you as a bond company, you're kind of like the fireman for the film, because in other words, when a problem comes up, you come up with a quick solution, get it taken care of, and keep the project moving forward. So you're kind of like the fireman for the film industry.
Yeah, but I wish I looked like a fireman.
Well, with the right makeup artist and a few hours in the chair, you could.
I think it's going to have to be in post-production visual effects.
Nah, it's like now we know why, because it's like you want to be the ghost in the shadows that nobody has actually seen.
Well, I figured it was just because he didn't want people to recognize him when he snuck onto the set, but I think he kind of laid that theory to waste tonight. So,
I will say if we do our job right, then we really are sort of the company behind the curtain. People don't see us. We're not on your set. We don't want to be on your set. We don't want to make your film. We're in our offices and getting your production reports and talking with you every day to discuss what's going on and any challenges you're facing. But if we did our homework right, we're sort of can be invisible, and that's how we like it.
So you are the ninja of the industry.
Exactly.
The ninja fireman. Okay, got it.
Yes. It's like
yes, indeed.
It's like, and I look forward to also having you back again. And thank you so much, Steve, because this has been like incredible and extremely informative. It's like, honest to goodness, it's like you are an amazing, amazing guest. Do we get to get you back again sometime?
Sure. Just let me know. And for people at home who aren't familiar with us, I just would suggest that they can go onto our website. It's UniFi, again, UNIFI, bonds, bonds.com. And there's a whole source of great information there, including samples of our contracts and agreements and all that kind of stuff. And it really tells you not only all the information about our staff, but also the whole process of what we do in terms of bonding a film. And it gives you all of our contact information, telephone numbers, email addresses. People can contact us directly.
So is that how you'd like us to contact you via social medias through the site?
Yeah, really, we're sort of old-fashioned. People can look at the site, get our email addresses or our phone numbers, and they can feel free to give us a call or shoot us an email. No problem.
Fantastic. And is there any up-and-coming things that you want to promote for us?
Well, sure. So, as a bond company, the films that we bond, like today, are not going to come out probably for another year. In terms of things that we did last year that recently came out or are about to come out, those included Miss Sloan, Baby Driver, Wish Upon, I think comes out this week, and Valerian is coming out next week.
Wow.
And in terms of the stuff, yeah, that was a big one.
I've been waiting for Valerian because I'm a huge fan of the comic.
Everybody go out and see Valerian, please.
Yeah, I plan on seeing that. I saw Baby Driver at the. I'm still lucky enough to have a drive-in, and I saw Baby Driver at the drive-in. Awesome movie, and I think he's going to have, whenever Valerian comes out, he's going to have that too. So I'll be watching that one too.
Yeah, cool. And then the things we're working on today, which will come out, probably months from now. Those include Battle of the Sexes with Steve Carell and Emma Stone playing Dorothy King and forgetting Bobby's last name, Bobby Riggs, and Guillermo del Toro's The Shape of Water, Kursk, which is about the first submarine disaster, and Mortal Engines, which is being produced in New Zealand by Peter Jackson and his whole Weta team. So look forward to those.
Very cool.
Awesome.
They sound like a lot of fun. And also, Arpo, who do we get you in social media?
Okay, well, if you don't mind, I got to turn my camera on for a minute because WC is griping that this is Friday night and he wants his cameo. So, there we go. Okay, so I will say that if you want to talk to me socially, then you can talk to me. You can reach me on Facebook. If you want to deal with me professionally, then you can always see me on LinkedIn. And I do like to hang out sometimes at the social forums of the Movies Underground. And if you like, you could just be, my Skype buddy. Just, I love to chat on Skype, and I'll talk to just about anybody. But make sure you tell me you're a fan of the show because I get way too many offers of marriage from Armenian women. I don't know why. I think it's the beard.
And also, just before we ask you also as well, Olaf, we wanted to also thank Anna E. again, and yes, we think you're awesome too.
Okay,
yes, Anna E. Awesome. A is for awesome. N is for nice. N is for nice. A is for awesome. Anna!
Yes, thank you, Anna E. And please continue to also follow us as well. And how do we get you in social media, or should we say stalk you in social media?
Yeah, you can stalk me on both Facebook and Twitter at Olaf Barbosa, but just don't stalk too close because I do get nervous and I do have an itchy trigger finger.
And you can get me on LinkedIn, Bizipedia, on Facebook, on Twitter, at Sonata Grayson, at Movietime Indie, at www.pastlivesproductionsinc.net, as well as always that I say that if you, with 4 pages of footprints, if you can't find me, you're just not stalking me hard enough. And please stay tuned to any of our 14 podcasting stations, and we love you all, and please keep adding us onto your stations because we love being there with you. And thank you all of our fans, and once again, thank you Dominic W. and Anna E. for joining us as well. I know that you guys are out there as well as all of you other fans as well, and please feel free to write us at any given time.
Write us. Tell us what we're doing right. Tell us what we're doing wrong.
It's like we like to hear good, bad, or indifferent. We just want to know how we're doing. So
that's right.
And Steve, you have been amazing, amazing, amazing. And please tell me that we will be, like I said, we will get you back again.
Sure thing. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Alrighty.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening.
All right. So long.